Ladies and gentlemen, come gather round, come gather round, come gather around. If you're new to the channel, I am a high school shop teacher. I teach metal, mechanics, and drafting. I design stuff, I build stuff, and it usually has something to do with cars. Today we're looking at one of my own projects, and in this video, it's fixing all the rust on this Chevy truck cab. If you like what you see here, subscribe and leave a comment below. If you're like me, you probably have no friends. And to get the cab off, this is how you're going to do it. Just a good old 4x4 post and an engine crane. The whole truck is held together with spot welds, so you got to find those and drill them out. If you have a chance to check out the videos on Gibson 63 on YouTube, the guy has a phenomenal amount of ability in showing how this stuff works. Get one of these drill bits. It's a spot weld driller, and oh my goodness, they are super duper handy. So you find all of the spot welds. You can dust it with some sandpaper and see them a little bit easier. Then I center punched. I drilled them all with an 1/8 inch double-ended drill bit. They're a really short spiral, or really short flutes, so they don't really break all that easily, and they're great for doing sheet metal. Then go through all of those with the spot weld driller, and then you can pry off the rocker panel. I had a hard time seeing the spot welds in the top because of the rust, so I ended up just using an air chisel and hammered it all away. All four of the cab supports on my truck were shot. So on the front, I just found all of the spot welds, drilled them out, and pulled them out of the frame, body, whatever. But they all got removed, and reproduction ones are, they fit all the cabs from 60 to 66, except the 60 to 63s have the front cab mounts in a different place. The cab support accounts for that and gives you a couple extra holes, but you can make them fit. I also measured the snot out of everything. I wanted to figure out exactly where are the rocker panels so that I could put the rocker panels back in exactly the same place and thus theoretically keep the door gaps consistent, or at least where they used to be. Spoiler alert, these trucks are garbage from the factory. Nothing lines up, nothing fits. Oh my gosh. So if you're looking for perfection, I would suggest looking somewhere else. This cab is in really pretty good shape, but nothing is perfect, and I'm not interested. The more I work on this, the less I want to go to a car show with it. So I measured everything so I can put it back. Incidentally, I would do this slightly different than I'm showing here. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. This is the way that made sense to me at the time. I think there's a better way to do rocker panels and floors that would result in a better panel fit, but I'll talk about that in a bit. We'll get to that in a moment indeed. You're going to want to stay fairly organized with this. You can see my cart full of tools. I try to keep that organized because the amount of mess this thing creates just makes me freaking snap. Speaking of mess, this sandblasting unit is fantastic. I really liked it. Lots of negative reviews about these blasters, but I really enjoyed it. And yeah, you can put a whole bag of sand in. I'd sweep it all up, sift it into a bucket, and then sift it into the container and blast with it some more. Wear the proper protective equipment when using the blaster. I use crushed glass, which as you use it and reuse it and reuse it becomes crushed glass dust, which is not good for your lungs at all. So take good care of yourself with that. After the blasting, I sprayed it with a 2K epoxy primer just to seal everything. None of these trucks were sprayed with anything before they were assembled. They're kind of garbage. So that's why they rust, largely from the inside out. So 2K epoxy should seal everything. Then I'm going to reassemble it all with everything sprayed on the inside with 2K epoxy and hopefully stave off the rust. This truck's 60 years old. If I can make it last, I mean, it lasted 60 years with the garbage paints and coatings and no coatings of the 1960s. If I can make it last with modern coatings another 60 years, I'll be well over 100 and probably shouldn't be driving. The reproduction panels that I got, they came from a couple different manufacturers. It really isn't going to matter where you get them from. None of them fit properly at all. So you're going to have to tweak and adjust and modify and do all kinds of things to get these silly panels to fit. I don't know what truck they referenced to build these panels, but the truck and the people doing it might have been drunk. So I make them all fit. Try your best and accept the fact that they're garbage. And even if they were awesome, your truck is garbage. No offense to your truck, but they're garbage. But they look neat, and I like that. So this is me pulling off a piece of one of the little kind of overlap pieces to cut out the rear cab support. Had to do this on both of them. And they were pretty rusty as well. The reproduction pieces are pretty garbage. And the back ones were particularly bad. None of the angles lined up at all. Also, you can see where I'm cutting out a rust through in the frame. Again, there was no coating in there. So when I put this all together, I coated the snot out of it to try and hold off the rust a bit more. But that's the cab support on the passenger side. And I think I trimmed out a lot of me fitting this cab support because it was horrid. Just horrid. A lot of time to get it to fit. However, I got them in and it works and I'm happy now, or happier. And I think I fitted the driver's side panel first and learned a bit from it. I've never done floors before, so this is totally new. I'm a rookie here. So I'm figuring it out as I go and adjusting and tweaking it to make it all happen. Notice the bracing through the cab. When you start cutting the floor out and the rockers, those are kind of structural parts of this box that you sit in when you drive. So it's a smart idea to brace everything before you take it apart so that it stays in the right shape when you cut everything out. And then you weld it all back together again, and then you can cut out the braces. I did MIG welding for almost everything. It's quick and dirty and I like it. I did experiment with oxy-acetylene welding a little bit later on, and with mixed success. However, those little clamps that hold the sheet metal together are awesome. Grab those when they go on sale. They are super handy. This cab support back here, I'm only showing you like a third or a quarter of the video of me tweaking that silly little thing. But we got it in. Once I had everything ready and it's ready to be welded back in, I dragged the thing back outside, blasted the area where I needed to weld. I don't want to have rust getting melted back into the weld. That will cause it to rust some more. I was quoted between $1,500 and $1,800 to blast absolutely everything on the truck. The frame, the cab, the box, the doors, the fenders. And that's a fair bit of coin. The advantage of having my own sandblaster is I can do it when I want, however much I want, and I can do it again if I have to. Let's patch a rust panel. Sheet metal brake. If you like that sheet metal brake, there's a link up above that you can see how I built the sheet metal brake. I like that sheet metal brake. I go to bed at night dreaming about it. It's awesome. I'm just bending the sheet metal into place. I don't think you can buy that as a patch panel, but it's nice to be able to make your own if you can't get what you're doing. It's why you want to modify a vehicle you can get parts for. That 67 Renault Dauphine is pretty cool, but I don't think you can get parts for it. Patching a hole at the back of the cab. Again, the sheet metal. This one had a little bit of a different flange to it, so I ran it through my tipping wheel on the bead roller to try and get the shape I want. Some gentle persuasion with the hammer until I got the curve the way I like it, and then cut it out. This way, I'm experimenting with rounded corners. Apparently, a 90-degree corner really focuses the heat in the corner when you weld it, and it can really warp the whole panel. So I'm trying rounded corners just to see how it works. Then I used a cutting disc and some sanders to get it nice and smooth, and it's going to be deliciously Bondo ready. I just don't have the mad tight skills to make it perfect sheet metal, but I'm pretty good at laying down some filler. So this floor panel has epoxy, 2K epoxy on it, both sides. And then I'm just tack welding it, trying to remember to plenish the weld to reduce the amount of shrink that happens. But it really turned out pretty good. Good penetration, not too much shrinkage to wreck the whole floor, or at least if I hide it with carpet and undercoating, you ain't never going to see it, so it's going to be fine. Getting my head through those bars to see what the heck I'm doing. I'm old. I got one foot in the grave and the other on a banana peel. I got to have reading glasses, but I can't look through the bottom of my progressive lenses to see what I'm doing. So I've got a cheater lens in my welding helmet, but I can't get my head close enough to see. It was brutal. In theory, you should tack weld the panel that you're putting in there in a couple little places, and then you're going to plenish the weld to hammer them flat to get rid of the shrinkage. Then you grind it down with a zip disc or something, and then you tack weld some more, and you plenish them, and you grind them down, and then you tack weld some more, and you plenish them, and you grind them down, then you tack, and it goes on and on. It is so boring, and I hate boring jobs. But in theory, this is how you're supposed to do it. I'm bored. Are you bored? Leave a comment below if you're bored, because this is, it was brutal. Looks nice, and nobody will ever see it. Other side, same thing. Taking a little bit of the paint off so I can weld it all, and yeah, I'll put another coat of epoxy primer over top of that when I'm done. Got those fancy sheet metal clamp things. I don't know what they're called. They're like a box with a little square peg on the bottom. Speaking of square pegs, I once knew a guy who... So to align these, I've got a little flat blade screwdriver to just kind of tweak these two panels into perfect alignment, give it a tack, and you just kind of move along as you go, trying to make it fit nice. I'm also making sure it fits nicely to the bottom of the A-pillar. I'm positioning the front cab support, drilling the holes to be spot welding it into place. Good shot of the back of my head. Nice to see I'm not going bald quite yet. And drilling holes to make it all work. Then what you do is a rosette or a plug weld where you weld in through the hole to weld whatever it is to whatever you drilled the hole through. On some of these I drilled holes in the support on the bottom. Sometimes I drilled holes on the top. It kind of depended on what I had access to. Since I had to drill out some rivets, some of the holes are bigger through the floor, so that's what I did. And then there's like, can I get the welder in there? That's kind of the challenge as well. And then fitting my big fat head between all these bars, trying to weld her closed. Yeah, fun times. When it comes together, it goes pretty cool. Then the bottom of the kick panel collected a bit of water and rusted through a little bit in a few places. And everything that got through the roof skin, came down the A-pillars, or collected from the cowl, or heaven knows where, all ends up in the bottom of this A-pillar, collects any dust or dirt, starts to rust, and so on. So I'm sanding everything. Once I got it all shaped and ready to be welded in, sand the snot out of it, both sides, lay down the tarp because I don't like paint on my shop floor, and lay down some 2K epoxy again. I'm using a wee little touch-up spray gun, HVLP, high volume, low pressure, from, I think I paid like $20 at Princess Auto. I kid you not, this is one of the nicest spraying guns I have. And almost all my guns are cheap Princess Auto, similar to Harbor Freight kind of horror guns that are cheap. I do have a really nice gun I use for laying down good paint, but these cheap ones, like $30, $40, are actually really decent little guns. They spray nice. Or maybe it's just me. Yeah, I got some mad tight skills. Clamping this guy into place, couple tacks, joining it up, try to keep the heat down, get those pillars in place, and grind it a little bit smooth. The rocker panel has to fit over top of that, so you got to make sure it fits good. And again, these things are just plain drunk. The holes don't fit, the panels don't fit, the shape doesn't fit. None of this fits, but you got to find a way to make it fit. I like these big honkin' vice grip clamps. The big ones I think they were on sale. I bought a couple of those. Super handy. Fitting the door. This is where tears show up. When you discover, oh my gosh, this door from the factory was adjusted so far up, there is no more adjustment at all, and it still needs to go a little higher. But, you know, these trucks were better than a tractor, I'll give you that. If you see the bottom of the door behind me there's a bit of rust. Interestingly, these doors, and the next video I do is repairing the doors, the bottom of those doors did not rust from the inside. They rusted from road salt coming up through the hole in the floor. So they rusted from the inside because of rust holes in the floor. Yay. Now, these outer rocker panels, you want to make them look really good because this is what you're going to see. Lucky for you, they don't fit worth a darn. So you're cutting and slicing and spreading and moving and tweaking and filling until you finally get it to fit nice. And this one, the driver's side, took a ton of adjustment to make it work, but I think I got it acceptable enough that I probably won't look at it. I really only wash my vehicles once a year, whether it needs it or not. So when this is all done, I'm probably not going to be really bothered by it. There's things that are not worth being OCD over for me, and that's like the care of my vehicles. I don't see the point of making it gorgeous, dust-free, and polish every nook and cranny. They're clean when I assemble them, and then I just drive them. This is how I would do things differently. I would cut out everything. Then I'd hang the door and fit the rocker to the door. Then I would fit the inner rocker and the floor. Then I'd fit the cab supports. It's kind of backwards from outside to in, but what really matters is your door gap. So get the door gap right, weld the rocker in, and everything else can be welded in from behind. It'll work. It's going to be okay. But at least what matters is at least lined up properly. This is welding the A-pillar bottom in on the passenger side. I did a couple other welds on this from the inside that I couldn't reach easily once I had the bars out of the way, but I didn't do a video of that. You can look at the old panels and figure out where all the spot welds went when you're attaching things, or you can make it up on your own. It's going to work out okay. If the flashing light causes you to do the funky chicken on the floor, leave a comment below and tell me all about it. If you're already on the floor, leave a comment. Tell me all about it. Hey, interestingly, a lot of people's trucks of this generation, the bottom of the cowl vent thingy rots out disastrously. But this thing, it's got a hole in the bottom to drain water that's about the size of a Polish sausage. So it's not really an issue, at least that I can see, unless it filled up with like pine needles or something. Mine rusted out where the fender attaches. Probably just water sitting there and collecting. So I had to cut that out. Since I'm going to be priming it with epoxy primer, I might as well get the rocker panels ready. Out comes a tarp, lay it down, and I usually do 2 coats of epoxy primer. Nothing like watching paint dry, which is why I sped it up. Anything that needed to be primed, the bottom of the A-pillars, bottom of the cab corner, whatever, lay down some primer. For inside of things, you could probably get away with using a roller. I love a roller. With the paint sprayer, you got to clean that spray gun. Don't leave garbage in there. 1.5 tons of welds. Actually, to clean off the paint, I have like the right size drill bit that I ground completely flat. And so it doesn't actually drill a hole, but it goes in and just scrapes all the paint out. Because you want to be welding to bare metal. Don't weld onto the paint. Used to be people would use a weld-through primer, but I'm not sure that's the best long term. So I just went for epoxy primer, and I'm hoping. Keep in mind, these things had nothing in there, so it's still going to be better. These little clamps are sweet for holding the bottom of a rocker panel. You can weld in between. Got some nice tight fitment, nice and tight like a toiger. Touch up all the little beads so it looks good. I think I used an angle grinder. Finger sander, that's a kind of a new tool. I should do a video on all the garbage tools I use, like auto body tools for guys who hate auto body. If you want to see a video on what tools to get to do auto body when you hate auto body, leave a comment down below. I could do one of these. Why not? Clamping everything together because ain't nothing fit properly. Weld the snot out of it. Check the door fitment. Try not to look at the gargantuan door gaps on every possible panel and weld that beast in, which we did. Spot welding's pretty good. If you welded a big honking long bead, you're going to put so much heat in there it's going to warp like a taco. But spot weld's kind of localized, and it doesn't really warp things. So I think spot welding's definitely the way to go. Oh, apparently I'm on the phone. Oh, somebody wanted a part from my kid's engine, so I'm talking about what it is and what it was worth, and we sold them a part. Those fancy clamps, always nice. Drilling the paint out, running the welder in, moving them around, getting the ones I couldn't get. Weld, 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 weld. Funky chicken. Oh, yes. Cleaning it up. Nice, pretty. These will get a coat of seam sealer to hide the cracks and fill it all in once it's all my bodywork's done and I've got a final coat of primer before I get into the final painting of this. We'll hope to see a video of that. We'll see. You'll notice I felt pen various dimensions on the body itself. That's just as a reference for me to remember what the heck the numbers were, because I can't remember nothing. I'm getting old, you know. I got one foot in the grave, the other on a roller skate. Cab corners. Interestingly, from the factory, they're pretty gosh darn sloppy. But since this is visible, I wanted to do a different kind of welding to hold it together. So I figured, since oxy-acetylene welding is supposed to be the best kind for auto body, it gently heats up the metal, lets it cool fairly gently, and it leaves a very malleable, shapeable weld. I figured I'd do oxyacetylene welding. I don't think I'm going to do oxyacetylene anymore on this cab. We'll talk about that in my next video on why the cab doors wanted to hate me so much. Anyways, sanding. I think I sanded all with 180. That's what the data sheet says to do if you're painting over top of E-coat or on top of old or relatively old epoxy primer. Spray it down with some pre-cleaner and then spray the good old juicy paint. Has an interesting smell, that stuff. Some paints use a I can't remember what it's called. Toxic stuff. Diisocyanate or something like that. You don't want to breathe that stuff. You look like Keith Richards pretty quickly if it doesn't immediately get you. So while that's curing, I'm welding in the patch that I had already painted when I sprayed the rockers. Weld it up, clean it up, and then when I do another coat, spray it on. There we are. And the cab corners are cut open so I can spray inside with the epoxy primer. You can get at the inside of the cab corners from inside the cab, but I'm there, right? Might as well seal it all up. So here's the oxyacetylene. I tried a 000 tip. I had heard from somebody that 000 is great for sheet metal. One of my instructors at BCIT welded together a TR4 that he cut in half and widened like 6 inches or so. And I had heard he used a 000 tip. I bought a 000 tip. Turns out for 18 gauge or 19 gauge that this is, you really should use a 0 tip. I happen to have a 0 tip. Either way, it was unpleasant. Oh, that was the kid showing up for a part from my kid's engine. Anyways, paneling, beading, slapping. I've got a file I made into a slapping file. I've got dollies. I've got hammers. Just trying to get this thing into the right shape and try to hide the disastrous defects of trying to make it all fit. And for everything else, there's filler. I love the smell of filler. Anyways, I'm trying to get this nice, using a ruler to make sure everything lines up good. And then since I did that side, now I can do this side. Notice how the whole panel moves when you tack it. You heat it up, it expands, it cools off, it shrinks. And if you're not really following that, this thing ends up to be an issue at the very end of your weld. So, in theory, that would work pretty good. MIG has its place. Oxyacetylene has its place. TIG has its place. Then replenishing the weld. Try to make it look nice. Some guys can make this stuff look like nobody ever molested the panel at all. They're just so good. I am not so good. And I missed this one little join. I had to add a little bit of metal there. But I can get at the backside with some epoxy, and I will. At any rate, it's going to be okay. Try not to be too fussy. This truck also had 2 plugged and silicone holes on the back of the cab. It used to be a Forest Service truck in Washington State. I guess these might have been antenna holes, like for a 2-way radio or a CB or whatever they might have had. I'm not sure why there were 2, one on top of each other, but there were. So again, oxyacetylene, weld those in. Nice thing about these reproduction panels is you get a whole bunch of offcuts that you can use somewhere else. Cool beans. And then I think I had to hit it with my purse. That was my purse. Value Village, leather purse for like $4. Fill it full of sand. It's a sandbag. Or you can go and pay $80 at a store for a proper metalworker's sandbag. I like Value Village. I get all my clothing from Value Village. This is folding the gas filler flange over so it's flat again, hammering it and planishing it flat, cutting out a piece to fit, holding it in place, and weld that beast in. The gas tank's going to get moved to the back of the truck, and we'll see that in a later video. I haven't done anything about it yet, so I got nothing to show. I have a gas tank, no mounts. Then the other cab mount, not cab mount, what the heck? This is a patch. You can see repair being done to the door. That's the next video. If you'd like to see the next video, subscribe, leave a comment, ring the bell. Vote Quimby. We love that sort of thing. And then welding everything, tacks, beating it from the inside, trying to get it to line up, all that gets hidden so nobody's going to care except for the most fussiest of people with the tightest of pants and the whitest of teeth, and we don't need to worry about them. Go to primer, too much primer, wipe it down. Good stuff. See the big pile of junk tools in there? Ugh. Next video, repairing the doors. Oh my gosh. Thanks for watching.